All right, good evening. We are back for another guest speaker event here at our Urbana Band Camp, and I'm thrilled to welcome this evening Vincent Thomas of Towson University and many, many organizations. He's a choreographer that we've had the pleasure of working with a couple times, and he's here to share some ideas and some wisdom with us. And we're joined also by Adrian Amegashie, our visual designer and instructor. And so welcome, Vincent. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just want to say that I am calling in from Towson, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway tribe. And I'm really glad to be in this virtual space with you.
Awesome. Great. So I have some questions for you, and we'll have some coming in from students periodically. And so I'd first like to understand a little bit more about your involvement. I know of your choreography, and that is, of course, your main gig as a professor of dance at Towson. But I know you've done a lot with the marching arts, and so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your history with color guard and choreography in the marching arts.
For sure. I have to go back to the early days, back in the 1900s. So in the 1900s, when I was a wee child, I was a trombone player in the middle school band and high school band, and then joined concert choir, jazz band, show choir. So I was heavily involved in music making. And then I became drum major of my high school marching band. And after the first year of being drum major, the drum major sees so much of the patterns and the music and the visuals up close and personal than audience do. And so I was a little concerned about what I was looking at from the color guard perspective. And I was bold then, and I told the band director, I said, maybe I could do that flag stuff. And so he said, well, sure. I don't know, but I'm very thankful that he put that faith in me. So going into my senior year, I was drum major, and I also started choreographing this flag and rifle stuff. And honestly, didn't know what I was doing, but I had fun creating something visual. And so then I went to USC in Columbia, South Carolina to get my music education degree. And from there, I joined what I came to know of as winterguard. And so I marched several years in an indoor winterguard at USC in Columbia, South Carolina called 308. And my instructor was Chase Mullins, and he was a Madison Scouts. So that was kind of my introduction to drum corps as well, and knowing about Madison Scouts and other drum corps. And from that winter guard experience, I said, well, I really want to increase my skills in this movement area. And so I took my very first formal dance class at USC as a freshman, as an elective. And so then it just started to snowball as far as I got more hungry for dance and more hungry for what this flag and rifle could do. And then during the summers, a band director asked me to teach his color guard because he knew of and had seen the winter guard. And so I did. And so that ball started to roll. Fast forward, in whatever year that was, when Carolina Crown first started, I was called to be the color guard caption head for this Carolina Crown Drum and Bugle Corps. And it was an amazing time because all of the instructors and the staff were all music educators And they were all friends of mine that we went to USC together, and a lot of them had marched, some of them had marched Suncoast Sound back in the day. And I was supposed to march Suncoast Sound, but ended up having to work that summer and wasn't able to do it. But anyway, so I spent 5 years at Carolina Crown, Drum and Bugle Corps, as the color guard caption head, and really building a foundation. And I loved it because we were working from the ground up. And so when I look at Carolina Crown now, I can see and understand that what foundation they're standing on, and that was built from the very first staff. And so from Carolina Crown, I then was asked by Michael Cesario, who's a major figurehead in the pageantry world and in DCI and WGI. He asked me to go to Dutch Boy up in Canada to work with their color guard for a little bit. So I did that in the very, very cold winter time, and came back. And then I decided, okay, I think I'm going to just leave this drum corps for a moment so I can go focus on my dancing. And I spent 3 years at the American Dance Festival in Charlotte, in North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina, dancing every day for the entire summer. And then doors opened for me to come back into drum corps in various different ways, and through Music for All, teaching the color guard there. Then when I went to Florida State, I started teaching Lake Mary High School from Lake Mary, Florida, and they were Scholastic A color guard then. And that went from them winning Scholastic A to moving into Open and being in the top 3 in Open, and then to move into Scholastic World, Lake Mary High School. And within that, I also started Paradigm Winter Guard. They're no longer, but they were pretty big then. And so it's been really amazing. And then when I moved to Washington, D.C. to dance with Liz Lerman Dance Exchange, another door opened for me to come and teach and work with the Winter Guard in Baltimore, the World Winter Guard, Just Class. And then from Just Class, another opportunity came for me to then work with Onyx World. And so I've been with Onyx for maybe it's 15 years now, which seems crazy that it goes by so fast. So I teach Onyx World and Mason World now, and still do a lot of drum corps and marching band body work and color guard designing stuff. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I know our color guard students especially are familiar with Onyx. We've been to Dayton in the last few years, and so we've gotten to see them at least once on each trip, and loved the variety and the entertainment value and everything. And I was curious what the design process is like there, with a program that does such esoteric designs many times. How do those concepts come about, and what's your part in that process?
Well, I will say that there are some really wonderful short documentaries on the process with, I think it's with Flow Marching. Okay. They did like a 3-part series on Onyx a couple of years ago. But, Michael Lentz is a genius. He's just really a genius. And so he is the instigator of this art. And so I'm very fortunate to be on this artistic creative team, where like his madman designish things happen, and he allows us, the staff, to really play, dream, challenge. And so what we enjoy doing is creating art. And I say that specifically because it's more than just color guard. It is flags and rifles and sabers and dancing on a gym floor, but it's so much more than that, in how we approach that artistic process. So, one weekend, we write a lot of things, and the next weekend it may be flipped upside down or on its head or rearranged or changed or taken apart to then put it back together again. So I particularly enjoy those type of processes, so that the work of art is it has a continual push and progression to it, so the performers don't get stagnant or bored. They are constantly challenged from the physicality of the equipment and the body book, and also the design book, and their mental capacity is also challenged too.
Yeah.
So that's probably a really big, long answer to the question that you're asking.
That was great.
I don't think there's a concrete way to really describe it, other than it's a process of creating art.
Yeah.
So,
you mentioned the performers. We have a student question from Maddie in our color guard, who was wondering what tips you have for guard members that get easily frustrated or are perfectionists of their craft.
Well, I know in my teaching and in my instruction at Onyx and anywhere is that I recognize that perfection first is elusive for me, and that I don't work for perfection, but I practice and work to be better than the time before. But I do understand where that question comes from, because of and it could be part of the activity, and it's stemming from a historical place of the military, and that rudimentary and that really precision-driven activity. But I think I also recognize that I work and teach and deal with humans, and that there's error in humans. And I embrace that as a beautiful thing. For instance, some people really harp on you not making a mistake. I actually love mistakes. Some people say mistakes. I actually love mistakes, especially when, as a performer, as an educator, as a teacher, you learn from that, and then you can go back to it and you can discover something new and different about what you had just done. So if I'm doing left-hand spins and stopping on an angle, and I make a mistake, and maybe this arm isn't as strong, then I can go back and say, oh, last time I did that, now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to find a little bit something different to add to it. So, it's about personal curiosity and investment every single time you do something. There was a quote long time ago that I learned: practice makes perfect, and I think that is I think it's damaging. Practice makes you better, especially is how you attend to that practice. And maybe practice makes perfect it's a word play and it sounds good, the double P's, but really, effective, really good practice makes you better.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction.
And that philosophy you're talking about, bringing play to the design process at Onyx, but also bringing play into your own practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I always think about and say as an agreement in a space is that I will have serious fun. And so I'm going to try to have more fun than you, but my fun it's a very serious. I'm seriously having fun in my work.
And that's kind of a feedback loop, right? You feel better about the work you're putting out, and that feeds into enjoying it more.
Exactly.
That's great. So, Vincent, I'm curious what everybody's going through different things with school and COVID, and I was wondering what you're up to now, what your dance classes are going to look like this fall.
Woo. Well, I can imagine, I can dream about what they're going to look like. And we will actually know what they're going to actually be when we get into that space. So right now I'm planning and I'm working on the syllabus and I'm planning the classes and stuff. And in my mind, it's working out really well. But we're going to find out a lot about it when we're actually in it. So at Towson University, we have a lot of protocols that we've been looking at and implementing for how we will be in the space, and it's going to be different than before. And so it's about how are we able to shift our idea of what normal is. And so I have been embracing and holding on to, okay, we are in a new normal. And instead of me really getting upset about that and missing the old, I'm okay. Like, I've had my moment, my grieving moment of missing what we used to do. But I'm really excited about what possibilities of what this will be now. So, for instance, one of the things that we're doing is we had to lower the enrollment number for some of the dance classes because we could only have, because of the PPE and the CDC recommendations for spatial and physical distancing. And so instead of having 30 in my men's class, now I only have 13. Or instead of having 15 or 16 in my modern 3 class, now I have 9 or 10. And so I'm excited about what that will look like and feel like, and having to dance in a mask constantly. So I've been actually working this summer, and even in the spring when I got some masks, I've been working out in my mask. I've been riding my bicycle in my mask because it's helping pattern, strengthen, re-educate my lungs in ways that probably hadn't been before. So, with this COVID-19 pandemic, there are many not so good things that people are recognizing about it. Well, I'm trying to change the narrative and look on the other side. So what's a good thing about it? Well, maybe my lungs are better now than they were before because I've been working out with a mask on and breathing maybe different or better, more efficiently. So it'll be different. We have to clean the space before and after. So it will be a different world, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. One of the things we're doing that I think a lot of people are looking into is these virtual performances. I think largely inspired by what Eric Whitaker's been doing for years with the virtual choir. Now we're seeing the virtual bands more out of necessity. And one of our students, Ahana from the flute section, was wondering what advice you had for maybe incorporating choreography into that type of setting. How we might be able to keep that part of what we do involved in something, even though we're going to be filming individually from our homes.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I don't have a prepared answer for it. But as I think right now, like as we see the space that we're in right now, we're in the center of the frame. But really, we've got so many more opportunities to explore this frame and to be in it, to have a relationship with it and this trio right here, that if I simply do this, okay, I can see it's moving me. But maybe if I'm in this corner here, what happens now to the space? What happens if I do this? And so I can then start using this as an interesting way to see space and choreography of all these different frames. So maybe the flutes, they enter from stage right. When they're playing, they cross over. Or maybe can you go near or can you go far? So you can play with the frame in a different way, that it becomes even more than just center yourself and play.
Right.
So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
You can still play with levels in this space. You can play with directions. You can play with closeness. See, I'm a little bit closer to you than I am to Adrian. And now I'm closer to, see. So I think to have fun, have serious fun in playing with what we see and how we see it would be a really interesting way to energize and innovate this space, this virtual space that we're in.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, is this something you've thought about before, knowing that your performances would be recorded to be viewed later? Do you take into consideration for live stage performances what's happening with the camera, how it's following you?
Well, when the pandemic hit, it was 2 weeks before my season concert at Theater Project in Baltimore. And so pretty quickly, we had to pivot within that. And there was so much that we didn't have figured out by that point. But what I did know is I want to do something, because I felt my artistic self had a desire to do something. My human self needed to connect with others. And so we did, myself and another collaborator, we actually did a 20-minute live stream of some work. And at that time, when I look back at that, because the camera was here and how I would cross here and then he would be and then I would wrap myself around. So when I look at the frame that way, I was able to see, wow, okay, that's interesting. And even though I'm kind of in silhouette or kind of in darkness here, I still can feel this presence in the space. So to answer your question, yeah, I think that notion came into existence for me then. But now having an opportunity to really play with what my art will be and look like, in the next version of our normalcy. Yeah.
That's great. So Vincent, we've been fortunate enough to have you out a few times to choreograph primarily for the wind players, and some of our most memorable moments are those things that you were a part of here. And I'm just wondering how you approach a group of wind players, or when you're at Carolina Crown. Clearly there's a lot more training there and a lot more time there, but how do you approach working with horn players that are not necessarily trained in as much dance compared with the work that you do with a dance company? How do you go from one to another so seamlessly and still get creative, organic results from both?
Wow, that's a huge question. I'm going to change my glasses, if you don't mind, to answer that one.
Sure.
Okay. So, one, I think the aura of Crown is one thing. So, for instance, going back in 2017, I was still able to look at the organization from a timeline, of growth. And so they actually, I think, spend less time in the physical practice as we did in the first 5 years. So I see that as an amazing foundational setting place, but also the kids, the members now, they also come in with more knowledge and more skills. They're no different from the members of Urbana High School marching band. They're kind of they're the same, or that's the way I approach them,
Mm-hmm.
So I tend not to, pedagogically for me, I tend to rely on human motions first, instead of relying on Eurocentric technical terms that may not mean anything to someone. It just sounds fancy.
Right.
But what I really want you to do is bend your knees. What I really want you to do is brush your leg like you're kicking a soccer ball and point your foot. So I could use the terms tendu, plie, dégagé, battement, but it may not mean anything. So when I teach and instruct, and I don't care if it's Carolina Crown, I don't care if it's Dutch Boy, Blue Stars, the cadets, I want to talk to them using terms that they walk around with and they understand. Bend your knees and keep your knees over your second toe. All right, that's an anatomical thing that everyone can understand.
Yeah.
Instead of plie, and there's some magical fairy dust that sprinkles over them and they begin to find that alignment in their body. I don't quite believe in that. And so I try to instruct and teach from a place of universal language and knowledge, instead of terms that may exclude some people at any given time. I also believe that everyone is capable. So how can I give the tools of capability to everyone for access? And so I also do that, at Onyx too. It's about giving them technical information through another lens that is quicker accessible, because everyone doesn't have their French terminology notebook in their pocket to pull out and, oh, that word means,
right.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a methodology of teaching that I really believe in, and instruction that I believe in, that I don't have to shape shift depending on who I'm teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I remember from the times that you've been here, the simplicity of the way that you explain things and the imagery that you use with our wind players is so understandable, and our kids have responded so well to it. So thank you for clarifying your philosophy behind that.
Is there a way that you approach the other end of things, where someone who has that visual background but is not necessarily musically educated, do you have a way of inviting that information towards them?
Yeah, and I think I love metaphor. I love visualization. I love how visually we're stimulated emotionally, physically, intellectually. And so, we can all be tornadoes, we can all ripple, we can all vibrate if we just tap into those senses that we have within our body to recall some of those emotions or motions to then put into the body. Does that happen in music? Sure.
Yeah.
And so it's finding those relatable and those relations that they do like this. So no wonder in South Africa or in the African continent that music and dance are not separated. You know what I mean?
The same language.
Yes. But that's another long story.
That's great. I'm curious, another observation from the times that you've come out and worked with our kids is I've always been impressed with how ready you are when we go, to the field or to the gym or whatever to work, because you're, as soon as we get here, you're stretching and you're hydrating, and you seem to just take care of yourself. I mean, you're such a gifted performer still, and in addition to all the choreography, and I think that's something that, especially in times like these, that we're all trying to think about self-care and how can we be our best selves. And I was wondering what, whether these circumstances or just normal circumstances, how do you stay so ready and how do you keep being your best self so that you can perform and give everything that you want to your art?
This phrase self-care, I've heard it so much during this pandemic, and it probably tells me that people have not been taking self-care. Let's be clear, self-care starts with self. Like, I have to do that for myself because no one else is going to do it. Yeah. Yeah, I am always knocking on wood that, that I haven't had any major injuries, in this dance life. So I know that I have to, and I want to, I have to, but I want to. I really want to take care of this one body that I have. I want to treat it as the temple that it is. And part of that temple of this body is my mind temple as well, and my heart temple. So yeah. So I think about a lot of my friends who are still down south who maybe not taking the best care of the physical selves that they could be. And I learned from that. I said, okay, so maybe I'll follow that path, or I'll go this path, which may hopefully benefit me in some other ways, But I think this whole self-care thing is very interesting, starting with self. And sometimes that's a very scary thing for people to tap into, to come face to face with what are the assets that we have, and not have to be told what those assets are from a mirror or the number of likes you get because you post something. So for me, part of my self-care is not seeking the like from something external.
Yeah.
The self-care for me is all about my internal well-being, and how that internal well-being affects my external.
What was your first step that you took into that? Like, how did you first introduce yourself to yourself?
Having honest conversations with myself about why I am different than, let's say, Taye Diggs. Okay, I will never be Taye Diggs. You know what I mean? And thankfully, he won't be ever be me. But what I do have, I can be the captain of this ship, of this vessel, and I can make it the best that I can make it. Taye Diggs is doing that for Taye Diggs, and he's the captain of his ship. And for both of us to live in this world and to be self-valued is important. So it's about valuing self. You know, I have to value myself too. In all the things that, you know, that maybe we're socialized to think are acceptable or right, or the right way to be or to look or to be in the world. Whose standard is that? You know what I mean? It's like, no, I want to go inside of myself and figure out what are things that I really value about myself and why. And sometimes those are courageous conversations to have, because sometimes it may not be pretty, but the results are beautiful, you know? So it's also about how I redefine beauty for myself.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you about collaboration and creativity. I'm a percussionist, as you know, and so I came up in that world and got exposed to some things, a lot of music and dance together, which of course makes sense. Seeing things like John Cage's work with Merce Cunningham. But I've seen that you use a lot of that type of collaboration with whether it be live musicians or poetry or other types of media. How do you approach that? Where do you draw your inspiration? And how important is that sort of cross-platform collaborative work to you?
Yeah, for me, it is very inspiring. So that's where I look for the inspiration from, those moments of being in a collaborating space with Love the Poet, who's this amazing spoken word artist, and how her words then unearth something else within me, or collaborating with Juan Soto Bone, this bass guitarist who's been playing in improvisationally and with me for the past couple of years with my concerts, and how we inspire each other, unknowing that, wow, that's going to unfold this, and then, wow, what happened with that? We got another idea. So inspiration, for me, it comes from those colliding moments of things we know, but we're seeking things we don't know. And so for me, that's the power of collaboration, that I can understand, okay, what I'm going to bring to this table is this. But what we're seeking from this table is things that we don't know may exist. So, and that could happen musically, it could happen within words, it could happen within visual, or an animator, or other dancers, or other, so I get really excited about that, of not knowing what's going to happen, but trusting the process, trusting that what I do know, this is what I know. What I don't know, I'm still seeking to find out. Because if I went into the collaborations and we were very stuck in what we know and not moving from that, then it's really not a collaboration to me. The collaboration really unearths something that you don't know yet.
Yeah.
So I love it. I absolutely love it. And I try to find artists who may not think that they're artists yet. So it might be a librarian, or it might be a sociologist, or an anthropologist, or an architect, to reframe. Okay, so how do you work? How do you work that? And then I might find choreographic or physical ways to then come out of that I hadn't explored yet. And so, yeah. So sometimes the genius is in the not knowing.
I think a lot of us fear the unknown because of what it might be that we don't like. What advice do you have for people who have that fear of a blank canvas, thinking that they might not like what comes out on the other end?
Yeah, I always say, be full of your value and free of judgment. And so I'm reminded of that when you ask that question, because I think when we approach things that way, and we're looking in the mirror at it, and in the rearview mirror at it, we don't see where we're going, or the possible pathways where we could go, because we're already thinking about, well, what is this going to look like, or how is the audience going to take that, And I would just say, let that go, and dare to be fearless in your serious play. Dare to be serious in your fearless play.
That's great. I might paint that on a wall somewhere. I like that.
Yeah, and I try to live that way. You know what I mean? Even with cooking, I could stick to a recipe, but what if I veered away from the recipe and did something else? Then what happens?
Yeah.
Then I'm not expecting, oh, this is going to taste like it did when I did it 5 weeks ago. And then I'm setting myself for disappointment, because maybe it doesn't come out exactly the way it did the first time I made it. Yeah.
That's great. You're speaking my language there. I like it. I've been cooking a lot in quarantine.
Yes.
As all the band kids know who follow me on Instagram, that's pretty much all I post is, here's what I'm cooking tonight, guys.
That's great. I do think that this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic has, I think it has tapped us into ways of being with our family and friends in ways that we had not been before, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And some people may be really sick of their family by now, but at least you've had that experience to kind of incubate with your family at a time when you were forced to, I was forced to be in my condo this summer. But the great thing that came out of it was, it's the first summer that I've been in one place. So I was able to get a new bathroom. I was able to redecorate. I was able to get some clothes out and recycle some clothes. I was able to clean. I was able to sit my butt on my balcony and look at the sunrise or the sunset, and to read or to meditate or to just look at the sky. And I'm very, very thankful for that, because otherwise I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah. And
so, that goes back to, how has that affected me as a human being? So I'm a little appreciative of the pandemic for that.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of time left, and we're not up against a hard end here, so take all the time you want. But I wanted to shift the conversation to talk about this project of yours with what's going on. And that's as timely a question as ever with everything going on. So I'd love it if you could tell us about that and share some of your thoughts and inspirations on that topic.
Yeah. And hopefully, I did send a video clip of, it's a promo reel from that, which really dates back to 2015 when we had the audition and started this process of working physically and creating this evening length piece of art. I didn't call it a dance show on purpose, but I called it an experience, because when the audience comes in, they are immersed in an experience that they will walk out, and hopefully they will walk out with new skin, a different way of being in the world. So what's going on? It looks at life, love, and social justice through the lens of Marvin Gaye's music. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Marvin Gaye, he was born in Washington, D.C., and grew up there. And his father was a preacher, and he grew up in the church and was singing, and then, of course, went to Motown, and the rest is history. But he's an icon from the Washington, D.C. area. So we wanted to really do something around that and his music. I was, and when I think about Marvin Gaye and his music, I had to go back to the first time that I heard a tune or a song by Marvin Gaye, and I heard it through the grapevine. And I was a little kid peering into the living room of my mom and dad, and to see them and their friends dance. And in that small confined space with them sweating and dancing, in hindsight, I've learned so much about myself, my family, my culture, my community. And so I believe the dancing that they were doing was also their way of physically being in their social justice. So this idea of life, love, and social justice, looking through his music, it zooms out of his music, those three things for me. And so we started the process in 2015 and took a year to build the work. And in 2016 was the premiere, a few days after the election. And it was a really, really powerful and really difficult, but also really therapeutic or elating place to perform from during that time in 2016. And so as I think about 2020, 4 years later, and the national touring that we've done all across this country of this work, it would be amazing to kind of bring it to a close in November of 2020. But because of where we are, so I've designed a virtual workshop called The Social Movement. And just like in the performance experience, I ask two questions of the audience. And in this workshop, I also ask two questions. And one of them is, what in your community do you celebrate? And the other question is, what in your community is a concern? So it gives an audience an opportunity to look at these two ways that they experience their life in their community, things that they really celebrate and love about their community, and things that are concerning for them in their community. And so now it's still very relevant, because I can ask the question, what do you celebrate or have you learned from this pandemic that is bringing you some rays of light? And what are some things you've learned in this pandemic that may be casting a shadow or some darkness on you. And of course, the kicker in both of these scenarios is, how do you then turn those concerns or turn those moments of darkness or shadow into rays of light for you? I believe that is where our work is in our communities. And so I throw the question to your band members. What are the things you really love about and celebrate about the band program? And in this pandemic, what are some things that is casting a little darkness or shadow on you about your band program? Now, how do you take and recognize those dark and shadowy moments? How do you then change the narrative and then change them to they become moments of light for you? So it's a big question, but you can also distill that down into your personal action and practice. So when you come to rehearsal and maybe you do an exercise and you say, oh, we're doing this exercise again. Okay, let's see if we can change that narrative, and how can we find the light or the celebration in that exercise? Okay, so if it's a roll down exercise, okay, so today I'm going to really think about the vertebrae moving one at a time, and I'm going to go into the exercise in a different way. I'm going to, in a way, not trick my mind, but I'm going to lead my mind to think about it in a different way so that it doesn't become something mundane or something so heavy that I don't want to do. No, I'm going to be curious about my learning. I'm going to be curious about, all right, so what is it today about this that I'm discovering? Or what is it about this scale rhythmic pattern that trips me up? How can I take that moment that it trips me up and turn it into something that I could celebrate and really enjoy going back to? So this whole idea of what's going on, for me, it keeps expanding into even in all aspects of our lives, from the very big questions, and I would say big questions like what's going to happen politically, and where are we with Black Lives Matter? Where are we with the idea of defunding the police? Where are we with all these things? Where are we with gun control? Where are we with homelessness? Where are we with food deserts? I mean, all these things we can think about. And then what are our active actions to turn those to something that we can celebrate? And so the last thing I'll say about that, it all comes back down to, okay, what can I do in my community? What can I do in my band program? What can I do in my choir? What can I do in the dance studio? What can I do in my family to find more rays of light?
That's great. Yeah, I've been really inspired watching that project come together and see the different aspects of it. And I think it's a great and incredibly timely topic. We one of the things we talk about when we get away from the performance aspects is citizenship, and I think we haven't gotten to do that much because we're not together in that typical way. But I look forward to maybe tomorrow in our sectional time having some discussions on that and answering those two questions about our band and about the situation that we're all kind of in right now.
Yeah, and when you say performance, it's an interesting thing that I think about performance. And for me, it's not like, all right, I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to turn it on. But I have to find my authentic self in performance. And that is that self-care. That is that work that I constantly have to do for myself to bring my honesty to every single thing that I do, to bring my authenticity, the integrity of how I'm working, even if I'm playing the scale with my trombone, if I pull that trombone out, or if I'm doing another bending at the knee or plie exercise or whatever I'm doing, I have to be my authentic self. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that when the performance happens, I can live in it in ways that are so true. And when people see that, they're blown away. And it's not something you just turn on and turn off like a light switch.
Yeah.
You know? But that's a very interesting thing that you just mentioned, just kind of made me think about that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Vincent, thank you so much for coming in. This has been a real pleasure. I think we can put your social media stuff up on the screen.
Yes, indeed.
Love to see people follow along and see what you're up to. Anything virtual coming up that kids can check out of yours?
There is a performance coming up in September, but I don't know if it's going to be virtual. I think it's going to be live. It might be virtual. If it is, I'm going to post it on my Facebook page or my website or whatever. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep following you there, and we'll look forward to whenever we're allowed to get back to normal rehearsals, bringing you back out and having you do some great choreography with us once again.
Yes, I always enjoy coming out there and working with the students. I think you have set up and created a community of bandism, if I may use that word. I mean, you created such an environment for the band that I can see how the students really have invested in that. I'm not going to say they bought into it. They have invested into that idea of what band is and can do for them. So whenever I get to work with them, it's always such an uplifting thing. So I just say kudos to you and your staff for doing what you do and how you're doing it. And I just love it.
Thank you so much. That was my heart. Like, you have no idea. So
yes, indeed.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. That's it.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.